Hello, and welcome to Office Hours with Dr. Dan. I'm Dan. The subject of today's video is writing letters of recommendation. And a letter of recommendation is your appraisal of why a person is suited for a particular job, internship, graduate program, or scholarship. So at some point in your career, some of your students are going to ask you for letters of recommendation. And a well-written, thoughtful letter of recommendation can help a student land a coveted job or internship, while a vague letter filled with generalities and grammatical errors can cause the student's application to be thrown in the trash. If you don't feel comfortable writing a letter of recommendation for someone, or you just don't have the time to write a good letter, then don't write the letter. You'll be doing yourself and the student a favor. And before we get into the heart of the video, I just want to bring up a point that at the school that I taught at for internal scholarships at the department, the college, or the university had control over awarding, there was a set form, a one-page form that students could ask their professors to fill out, and was going through checking some boxes, filling in a few sentences to give the scholarship committee the information they needed. So you didn't have to write a formal businessy type letter of recommendation. It was just going through and checking some boxes and putting in a few sentences. It greatly sped up the time for the professors and for the people who are having to do the evaluation. So if your school does not have a program like that, then consider trying to institute one, because it will save everyone a lot of time. And one of the things with letters of recommendations to keep in mind is you need to protect your reputation. You need to make sure that the value of your letters stay consistent the longer you are a professor. So again, the longer you're a professor, the more letters you're going to write, and you're in a specific field. You may have multiple students over the years or within the same graduating class applying for the same position within the same company. So the same people are going to be reviewing all of these packets, these application packets, and if they see your letter 3 or 4 times in the same hiring cycle, and it's basically just been change the name within that letter, then your letter's not going to carry much weight, because you basically have a form letter that you're just doing a global replace for the student's name. You can't say every student is the best student you've ever had. Right? You need to say that this is the best student I've ever had for that best student you've had. Your letters of recommendation will be formulaic, but again, they should not be form letters. You need to use the student's name in the body of the letter, but don't overdo it. You don't need to have the student's name in every single sentence, but you need to make sure that you're including that student's name in appropriate places. So again, that it's not just some form letter, and make sure you use the correct pronoun. Because again, you're probably going to come in, you're going to open up an old letter of recommendation, make some changes, and then do some hard changes to that letter. There's nothing that says you have to come in and start with a blank computer screen every time you write a letter of recommendation. Again, they're formulaic, but they should not be form letters. Also, you need to let a student know if you can't write a good letter of recommendation for you. If someone that you've had for a class or several classes comes up to you and asks for a letter of recommendation, and you've just not been impressed with that student's performance, either grade-wise or how they conduct themselves, then just tell the student flat out that you can't write them a good letter of recommendation. It would be better to go ask another professor. Saves you a lot of time, and then you're not writing some letter that you don't really believe in. So again, tell the students to go to a professor they've done well in the class if you can't write them a good letter of recommendation. And be honest and specific in what you write, but don't embellish the student's performance. If you've had them for 2 or 3 classes and they've been a C student in all those classes, there's really not much you can say about their grades. But how does that student's work ethic, maturity, judgment, self-motivation, curiosity, intellect, interpersonal skills, civility, how do those compare to their peers? Because a letter of recommendation is there to give potential employers or grad school committees or scholarship committees information that they can't get from a transcript. I mean, you can get someone's GPA from a transcript, but you can't get how do they work in a team. Are they punctual? Are they self-motivated? So that is something that the letter of recommendation can tell the person reading that. Things that are important for that job or scholarship, but that aren't going to be on a transcript or a resume. And again, as far as being specific, it's better to say that this student was one of the top 5 students you've had in X years of teaching, rather than just saying that they're a top student. Again, be specific. If they were the top student in your class of 50 people, then say that. If they were the top 10% of 50 people, say that. If they're the top person in a class of 5, that generally doesn't carry as much weight. The greater the number of students in the class, generally the better making a comment like that is. Try to keep your letter to 1 page and make sure you stay on track. If you're writing a letter for a job, then keep it towards work things. If it's a letter for scholarship, keep it towards the academic side of the house. And if you can't fill up 1 page, then should you really be writing that letter? If you don't know that student well enough to come up with 1 solid page of why they're the best person or why they're qualified for this particular job or scholarship, then you probably shouldn't be writing the letter. Don't use excessively sophisticated language or unnecessary jargon. You don't want to write the letter at an elementary school level, but you don't need to pull out a bunch of 5-syllable words when a more simple word will be appropriate. So you don't want to write the letter too complex, because that's just going to detract from someone trying to make heads or tails of the letter. Will you let the student see the letter? I always let the student see the letter before I send it out, as much to let them know what was coming as also to get some feedback. Did I misstate something? Is something not clear? Would they rather I mention one thing and not another? Now, I'm not going to let the student write the letter for me and just sign my name to it, but if they would rather one thing be included and not another, and I'm not embellishing anything, then it's the student who's got the most to gain or lose from that. I'm going to give them a say in the letter. I'm not going to let them write the letter and just sign my name to it and go out, but I believe in giving the student a chance for feedback, unless that student is applying for a job that is security sensitive. If it's a job that they're going to have some kind of security clearance, and I'm giving my opinion on their trustworthiness, then probably not going to let the student see that letter, and I'm going to let them know that ahead of time, just so they're not expecting to be able to see the letter. And on the thing of simplifying your work, if a student asks me for a letter of recommendation, I would ask them to submit me a draft letter of recommendation containing things like the name and address of who the letter's supposed to go to, their extracurricular activities, their cumulative GPA, their job experience, and the position they're applying for. This is just a way to give me some information that I may not know about the student, so that I can incorporate that or not incorporate that into my letter. So again, I'm not letting the student write the letter, but this is a good way of getting the student to focus on things and get me the information I need. And some potential contents for the letter, again, you're going to have to vary what you put in a letter depending on what position the student is applying for. But one of the things you can put in is what classes did the student have with you. And the more classes you've had the student for, I taught at a small school. There were students that graduated that I had for 4 or 5 different classes from freshman through senior year. So when you teach a small school, you get to know the students. And the more times you've had a student in class, the more weight your letter can carry, because it's like, oh, well, this person's, this professor's seen this person through 4 or 5 classes. They're going to be a lot more knowledgeable about the student than someone that's only had him for 1 class. And how has that student distinguished themselves from the other people in the class? Are they in the top 10%? Did they finish at the top of the class one time? Are they always ready for class? Do they always turn in their homework. Again, what makes this person stand out from the rest of the class? And why would the student be a good fit for whatever program or job they're applying to? And if you have experience in the area the student is applying to, so let's say you're a structural engineer, you're teaching structural engineering, you do structural engineering as a consultant, and this student wants to be a structural engineer, and you've seen them work, you've seen how they handle the tests, you've seen how they handle the homework problems, are they curious? Then you could bring that in as something like, as a practicing structural engineer, so-and-so has the skills needed to do that. So if you have experience in the area the student is applying, bring that in. Would you be willing to work for or with this student in industry? Right? Because teamwork is important out in the real world. It can be important in an academic setting too, or a graduate program. So teamwork, does a person work well with others? Or are they a jerk that gets everyone spun up? Or do they go and hide in a corner and not want to interact with people? So if they are good in teams, let the employer or the grad committee know that. And were there any special circumstances that meant the student had to work harder than everybody else to achieve what they did? And by that I mean, are they working full-time and going to school full-time and still getting amazing grades? If they're doing that, then they're very good at managing their time and prioritizing things. Did they have an hour and a half commute each way to get to and from school and are still doing good? So are they involved in campus activities and again still doing well in their classes? So someone who all they do is study and does well, that's great for them to focus on school, but someone who can mix other things together and still do well in school, that's something you can bring up into the letter. And as far as the actual format of the letter, it's kind of standard business formatting. This is not the time to try to be cute or cutting edge. You need to keep it very professional, very businesslike. And correct grammar and punctuation is vital. If you have a letter that is full of grammatical errors and is hard to follow, that's just really going to hurt a student. So if you're writing the letter in English and English is not your first language and you have not mastered it, it's really incumbent upon you to have someone whose native language is English or who has really mastered it to take a quick look through that to make sure everything makes sense. So leave your ego at the door and do your student a favor and make sure that the letter makes sense, that it is well thought out, that it is specific to that student for that opportunity they're trying to get. So hopefully this has helped. Take care, and I'll see you next time.